want to apologize to our last speaker that he is the last speaker, and the only thing I can say in his defense is that the work that he has done is visible all over the world, and particularly in Ireland. A wonderful story that when I first heard it, I didn't really believe. A man who has brought back to Ireland the skills that James Hoban initiated many years ago. So without further introduction, we'll hear Travis Price.
Good. Taking great note of this afternoon is that I'm for sure half Irish and half Greek, so that makes me have and I teach at Catholic University, so I figure I have at least 3 steps in 3 empires, and I live in Washington, D.C. at this point. And that also, like my mother used to say, well, we created Western civilization, and the Irish side helped preserve it, or save it, as we all know. But I sort of have a whole different little fun story for you guys. It'll be much shorter, because I did time this for 15 minutes, knowing I can run. But the spirit of play, spirit of design is, I have 3 hats. I have a busy 60-hour-a-week practice in Georgetown, and I'm an extreme modernist architect, and I teach 2 graduate courses at Catholic University. One is Cultures in Sacred Space. The other is the spirit of place, spirit of design, build expeditions. And the third is I do travel a lot for National Geographic. I lecture on their tours and so forth. I just got back from the 8 sacred places of the world, which shivered me, the intensity of seeing so many places in tandem together and watching the unknown speak to everyone. But Spirit of Place is largely a program that started, and it reminds me a lot of what Brian was saying earlier, on the basis of embedded in us are metaphors and lyrics, almost in a Jungian and a sort of, if you would, Joseph Campbell sense. These things compose us, and these stories resonate through all those layers of history. And so my whole life has been pursuing, even dropping out of architecture school, to go and study the great books at St. John's in Annapolis, for instance, and ironically have a roommate named Charles Carroll. But the part of it was to find the deepest stories. And today we've heard loads of storytelling, and of course Ireland is all anything but that. It's every stone has 3 stories. And so for 25 years, Wade Davis and I started a program to dig deep into, for National Geographic, the deepest stories, the most ancient architecture, and then most importantly, and I have to say all this because it'll explain what we did for these people in Kilkenny, is to explain those stories, but in a modern idiom. In a way, my view is the history is absolutely critical precedence, and not to know it is to relive it, of course, but deep down inside, how do I tell that story in my era, and in a way that, what would James Hoban have done today if the White House was started? In fact, the Washington Post had a big design competition just about that. What would you do today? Because to tell the stories over again, that's what the Spirit of Place expeditions are about, and it's where the spirit of geography meets the geography of the spirit. For my arrows here, yeah. So I wrote a book about this. This is the 25th year coming up next year, where I have taken 20 to 25, this year 40 students, on a journey where we'll spend an entire month or 2 studying a great metaphorical history, a great place in the world that I've found and worked on for years. And then we'll actually write poems, design pieces, and then we will actually turn it into one project where we link together those stories and try and evoke them the same way you would be evoked in a church, or lifted in a mass, or lifted in Shalat to surrender in Islam, or synagogue, and so on. All this is to tell you that I wrote the book. It's called The Mythic Modern, and it's about an entire global view that I've taken. And as Dennis said, I mean, all the way from the Northwest native Haida culture to Machu Picchu to Finland to Nepal twice, and we've ended up, we designed this, detail it, I raised the funds, and we build the whole project in 9 days. This is what's remarkable, and I think if the White House builder was tough, I can match him. So I go from poet to drill sergeant. when I go around the world. But some of these projects have been floating in the 10,000 senses in the Peruvian Amazon and understanding the deep shamanic view of the world. Or going to the Kalevala epic, which is over 5,000 years old. It sort of predates Beowulf, and this is an incredible story about the great Wainamoinen, the great king of ancient Finland, and he was a shapeshifter. I could tell 2 hours about each of these, and I'm just giving you a taste of the global aspects of this, because this is really that multicultural world we're delving into, and the danger of our modern world is its homogeneity. That has driven me for decades now. Or the Sea of Souls in the Magar Dead in eastern Nepal, right on the Bhutan border. Imagine building this at 8,000 feet. Or ending up back at Inishturk in County Mayo. 7 of the 8 projects I've done in Ireland out of the 25 I've done all around or all in Mayo. But the Tale of the Tongs was the year of the gathering, and there's actually documentary film that Nat Geo did on this one. Or to recently do 2 famine graves in Swinford and really raise the curse, resurrect the death knoll that is around these famine graves, the procession of the souls. And the Great Crossing now at Downpatrick Head in Mayo has just made the first signature stopping point for the Wild Atlantic Way, which is, Fáilte Ireland's great new piece to bring the West Coast alive again with culture and storytelling and, of course, landscape. This project in the past 7 have won national AIA Design Awards in the United States for all the students. And then the last year was the Musica offering. This is an ancient pre-Incan tribe down in Colombia, South America, where we built a meeting place for the 4 shamans. It also just won a national award. And this was literally, folks, if you want the pot of gold in Ireland, you should try to go to Lake Guatavita. This is where the Spaniards found it all. It is El Dorado. It's being resurrected now. And last but not least, that's that wonderful sheep in the Gibson Hotel in Dublin. I love the Ramsay Bottom head. But we just finished our last triumphant project in Kong, literally 1 step into Galway, 1 step into Mayo. And I'm just showing you this to say this is the kind of thing that's done in 9 days after spending a year and a half in planning. And to build, this is the place where Matthew 12 is Fishers of Men celebrates Manamaclír, the great ancient sea god. And we're actually working on another big project there. But in 2008, and I don't know if I should change this based on the new data, since we're living in the world where we can change reality so much in the media, I got contacted by Kathleen Lane, who couldn't make it today. And this is just the story of what happened about James Hoban. And she said, you got to come over to the AIA. I said, I'm working, I'm 60 hours a week here. She said, come over and meet these amazing people from Kilkenny. And she had, of course, she was a major official at the National AIA, and everybody was sorting out, like, we have the opportunity here with the James Hoban Society to make a memorial, some sort of monument to his great efforts. And I went, okay, that sounds interesting. And we get there, and of course there's everything from make a realistic White House to who are we, what are we doing? It was clever, and I think I came in late and they just called me, a sacred place man. That's my nickname up at the cathedral. I've taught this at the cathedral as well. So we met, and gosh, what a honor it would be. And I just said, well, guys, we're just we're trying to reinterpret this, but this is about a human character. So this is a great story. I mean, this could be Homeric. I think that was the great phrase in The Quiet Man after the first evening of marriage, if you remember that little scene. And so I said, this would be great, but honestly, this is all we do, and we wouldn't know to do a literal piece. I personally believe that the classics are fantastic. I've done my Greek. I couldn't wait to be a Johnny and do the 4 years. But I also sort of believe that history, as I say in often historic districts, is defined not by repetition or copy, but by change itself. That if the Historic Preservation Group had been around the Georgian period, well, there might not have been a Victorian one. And it goes on, but you really have to focus on quality and storytelling and then work in various idioms. After all, Picasso said it's not abstract unless it's abstract about something. So his realism is superb, but his abstractions take you to worlds you can't normally feel. And it's about those feelings. So suddenly, we convinced everyone that we might go to Callan and meet and sort out what we might do to how would we celebrate this phenomenal individual. And all the research went on a year in advance. We went over to Callan. This is largely for people who haven't been to Ireland, and began to look at what would we say about the architect of the White House. Fantastic, good classical studies. No, that's not quite the whole message. Thorough, and what an environment. So I'm walking around, and Dennis greets us all. We meet Laurie, who's sitting right there, and you'll see him in a minute. And we get a slight look at some of his early work, including a house that I think was the Protestant minister's home at that point. And then we have the public meeting. And lordy me, I did not expect this because it was quite a free-for-all. And this slide image will teach you not to trust anyone who does this with their hands. All are guilty or sitting in this room. But there was a big debate. A mile out of town is this little place called Dessart. Now, it went on, and there was a slight pushing and shoving, as I recall. A few swings might have come out. But he's a Dessart man or he's a Callan man. Well, he went to Mass in Callan, but he was born in Dessart. And so finally it hit me. I've got to solve this problem, in some way. So I said, well, no, he's a DC man after all. This is where he did his triumph. And I somehow said we would do a 3-part piece, which I never lived through on. One piece of that monument would be here, one piece in Dessart, and one piece in Callan. And after everybody sort of calmed down and got happy, Dessart sort of won the day. And because there was, this was it. This is the little plot of land. I'm just going to use this. And that's it. That was, even the little piece of trash was perfect. I didn't stage that shot. But that was our site. I thought, a busy highway, right when I could be in the middle of this town. And we went back and forth. Remember, we had so many little entanglements trying to pick it out. But that was the site, and it's literally right, on spot with where he was born. And how the process went is we went through all sorts of stuff. I mean, every student had to come up with adjectives, and we all worked together for months on the poetics of this. That's the heart of it, because without a metaphor, to me, there can't be architecture. Without a story, and as my friends always say, Travis has never met a metaphor he didn't like. So it's where I live. And so the students got fired up. Of course, it's Catholic University of America. There are a few Irish bloods there, to be sure, and if not all. They allow some Italians in occasionally. Anyway, but the model was developed. We got acquiesce and we got some a go-ahead. And then this just shows you what it's like. I mean, these are when it's sunny. And as we all know, there are 4 seasons a day in Ireland. We had the blue tarp ready on command. No, not now. No, not now. We have 3 more minutes. Keep working. Keep working. And boom, it flipped up. The rains went, and we sort of stayed mud-free, although this was the normal day. Now, what it's like in Ireland, waking up at 6, getting a full Irish breakfast. I'm a draconian. You have to, if you're not at the site by 6:45, there's a flight in Shannon waiting for you. And if you pick out that iPhone and start selfieing, you can pick it up at the dean's office in 2 weeks, which is the worst opioid to let go of for a student, of course. But we arrive and we crank. You can see our tarps. There was wet anguish. There were loads of moments of joyous interludes. And one of the tactical things about all this is we have to keep the poetic alive. We have to keep people happy and keep them busy. So almost like a mahal, everybody's working. They're on top of each other. I don't know how we do it, but we get it done in 9 days. And also, there is this little thing called the pub at night, which can be very dangerous if you're out drilling the next morning. But slowly but surely, the devil and the details. And I'm going to tell you how we saw the picture philosophically in a moment. But right down to the last blade of grass, we're on a run because we know that Dennis and his wild gang of dignitaries and about 200 or 300 people are showing up at this specific time, and the press will show, and we have to be done. But we did take one day out because Kathleen's uncle is the captain of the Kilkenny Cats and has a pub there, and that just about wrecked me more than any project. Trying to play for 1 hour with the Kilkenny Cats was like a wipeout. And then the day arrives. We're done, and everybody's arriving. I got them to hose down the students, and the dignitaries and diggers have come to be. And slowly the process evolves. We're done. And this little tower I'll explain later, because simultaneously I've assigned graduate students to do amazing studies. What would it be like to reinterpret James Hoban's life as a museum? And one day we hope we'll build one, and there's a sort of tower of them. But as you approach the site, we also celebrated, by the way, Father Willie was on his way to the Vatican the following week to sing, and it was very strange to have, back to the Obama, there was an entire white, black, African-American gospel music choir for the opening day. And at the same time, you don't even ask what happened through the night, but the barn dance did go on. I believe he's related, I can't remember, Dennis, but actually in the Hoban genetic chain somewhere.
He just is in the farm that the Hoban...
Yeah, exactly, that's his turf. So, and I always got there about an hour early, and this lady joined, and she was probably in her 70s, 80s, and I was chatting with her, and I'm always worried, because, all these things I've just boasted about, can I really evoke the story and the spirit of James Hoban, or wherever we're going to go, comes to? And I said, so what do you think? And she was strolling around and looking and saying, oh, I don't know. It's a modern design. I went, oh, Jesus, that's gonna, I'm gonna, but it draws me into an old story. And that story really comes out in this project, because struggle, perseverance, and triumph. I mean, everything you've heard today, these moments, and as Seamus Caulfield often tells me from Cage of Fields, that it's the back and forth. The tide that goes out is not the same as the tide that comes in, but without each other, they can't exist. And it's this weaving back and forth. And so this lady warmed my heart up. And as you approach the project, every single poem, every single image or object about his life, and we researched it a lot, is actually structured. On the side going in, you see in English these adjectives that all the students used. On the opposite side, frosted and clear, you see it all in Gaelic. And as you go through the project, you begin to see, even with the local stone, we used the extreme rough, and then the Kilkenny stone and limestone at the end, and finally, yes, Carrara marble. Why? To evoke the emotion of the White House. That cube is the moment of his triumph in many respects. And as you walk along these stories, and always goes back to seeing very clearly as the sun moves across this project. Once you have to understand about modern architecture, it's very dynamic if it's minimalist and if it's serene. And these words cast themselves on the lawn in the sunny days, and the shadows take it away. And so from one side, as you're driving down a highway, you have the Robert Venturi problem. How do I get your attention? I can't do the Taj Mahal on steroids. I can't do a new, road map. So I start seeing these objects, and I start to get an emotion of that struggle, and the glass beckons me in. And as I walk along, I start seeing those stories. And we went down and actually got the records. You can see the shadow lines and so forth. And as you wander through, you feel the spirit, that embedded spirit that I think was so said eloquently earlier, that goes with those layers. It's those layers in Rome, it's those layers in Washington that matter. We had a final dedication, so that's my, not James Brown, I could do that too. This is my Dan Brown ode to the project when Heidi Hess put in her piece with the day as people were leaving, and you have to go find it, but it's a little piece of daimon that tells the heart of the whole story, hidden in the rock, made out of silver. We even thought, what a wonderful thing to go inside and actually have some of the original prints, and we etched them in the glass. So as the sun moves, and as you walk through to this one dry spot where it's always drizzling, but you can stay dry, wow, wouldn't it be great just to see those plans floating across a clear white landscape? And so as I sort of end my 15 minutes, I'm really proud about this project. I mean, not only did it win a number of design awards from DC and the AIA for the students and myself, but it's always been a great way to sort of experience retelling the story in a modern architecture. This is the beginning of the project, first night at the pub. It does look like the end of the project with exhaustion. But there we all are. It was just a great engagement, and talking about the last talk. I mean, these students, some of Irish, some of not, are now no longer tourists or just architects. They're true travelers. Their names, the story, are all cut into this with the local craftsmen, and they're great craftsmen. I mean, this was the whole part of the projects each year, is to tell the tale but walk away and know that they'll be bringing their children and their grandchildren to visit this memorial, as well as finally, James Hoban has something that I think sparkles his spirit of triumph after loads of struggles and so on. And even later, I think you'll begin to see what you're seeing in parts of Dublin these days, this morphing of modern architecture, but modern architecture that speaks to nature, but more importantly, speaks to telling a story. And that was what's so great about the classical. I couldn't love Alexander the Great more and his architecture, but I think it's, as the Renaissance showed us, we can, and Julius II showed us in the rebuilding of the Basilica, things can change. And things change, and we are in a steel and glass era. So hopefully one day we'll all be visiting the James Hoban Museum, and one day we'll get a chance to bring a piece of Dessart/Callan back with us and do something in Washington that echoes, as we've promised. I just haven't gotten to the promise yet, because as they say in India, I need more vitamin M, money. And but I want to thank you for experiencing it. And I hope it puts a nice wrapper on what was an extraordinary day. I feel like my head's exploding, but I do feel that it's all woven into this project, everything I've heard from everybody today. And I hope you'll visit it soon. Thank you.
I visited recently the Spirit of Place installation in Cong, but before that I hadn't really visited too many of the ones in Mayo, and I asked a friend of mine who lives in Westport how they were being received. And he had made a practice of going to some of them, and he said, well, I don't know exactly how they're being received, but he said, I went out there to one, this is maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and there was a lady sitting there, and I said to her, what do you think of this? And she says, well, I don't know what to think, but I do know one thing, she said. My mother died recently, and I was riven with grief, and this was the only place that I could find any tranquility. And it made me feel that this language that Travis speaks and that he teaches his students to speak is a separate language, as we have been hearing from many people today, that speaks silently, that you have to learn and you have to appreciate. And I thank Travis for making that happen so often and so well in Ireland. I think that's a wonderful end to our little event today. I want to thank you all for your forbearance